When a racist boss fired a hardworking black employee, he thought he was putting her in her place. But what he didn't know was who she really was. And when the truth came out, it left him utterly speechless. This wasn't just a case of prejudice. It was a lesson in humility he would never forget. The tables turned in a way no one expected, and the boss quickly realized he had made the biggest mistake of his career. You won't believe how one moment of arrogance led to a shocking twist that left everyone in the company stunned. Stay tuned to hear the full story. It's not just about workplace drama, it's a powerful example of standing strong in the face of injustice. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more eye-opening stories like this. James Parker was the CEO of a medium-sized tech company. He was a man in his 50s, known for his sharp suits and even sharper tongue. To his colleagues, he seemed like a confident leader. But under that exterior was someone who judged people unfairly. James often made assumptions about his employees based on how they looked or where they came from. He believed he knew who belonged in his company and who didn't. Then there was Mia Johnson, a hardworking black woman in her early 30s. Mia was intelligent and capable. With a degree from one of the top universities in the country, she joined the company with big hopes of building her career and making a difference. From the start, she worked harder than most, staying late and always delivering great results. But no matter what she did, it felt like her efforts were invisible to James. Mia's desk was in a quiet corner of the open office. The space was modern, with sleek glass walls and bright lighting, but it often felt cold to Mia. James rarely acknowledged her contributions in meetings, even when her work clearly stood out. Instead, he focused his attention on employees who he believed were his type. These were the ones who looked like him, thought like him, and didn't challenge his biases. Despite the challenges, Mia stayed professional. She kept her head down and did her job well, hoping that one day her work would speak for itself. She believed in earning her success the right way without cutting corners or using connections. What no one at the office knew was that Mia had an important family background. Her father was a well-known business leader and served on the boards of several major companies. Her family had deep ties in the industry, but Mia never mentioned it. She wanted to succeed on her own terms, proving her worth without relying on her family's reputation. One morning, Mia received an email from James asking her to meet in his office. The subject line was brief: discussion regarding your role. She walked in, her heart heavy with unease. James was sitting behind his desk, his expression cold and serious. The large windows behind him let in bright sunlight, but the room felt tense. Mia knew this meeting wouldn't be easy, but she had no idea it would lead to something that would change everything. Mia entered James's office with her head held high, even though her heart was pounding. James sat behind his large wooden desk, his sharp suit and cold expression making the atmosphere even more tense. His office was filled with sleek furniture, large windows, and a commanding air that matched his personality. But no amount of luxury could hide the discomfort Mia felt walking into the room. "Have a seat," James said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His voice was firm and emotionless. Mia nodded politely and sat down, clutching her notebook. She had no idea why she had been called in, but the tight expression on James's face didn't leave much room for hope. James leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Mia, I've been reviewing your performance," he began, his tone slow and deliberate. "While you've met the basic expectations of your role, I've come to the conclusion that you're not the right fit for this company." Mia's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Could you explain what you mean by that?" James let out a small sigh, as if her question was an inconvenience. Your work is fine, but you haven't connected with the team the way I would have hoped. This company thrives on collaboration, and I don't think your contributions align with the culture we're building here. Mia felt a mix of anger and disbelief rise in her chest. She had spent countless late nights finishing projects, had gone out of her way to help colleagues, and had consistently delivered results. Yet here she was, being told she didn't fit. She wanted to speak up, to defend herself, but she knew better. James wasn't looking for a discussion. His mind was already made up. I understand, Mia said calmly, keeping her emotions in check. Could you provide specific examples of where I didn't meet expectations? James hesitated, his confidence faltering for a moment. It's not about specifics, he said quickly. It's about the overall picture. I need employees who fit seamlessly into the team, and unfortunately, I don't see that happening with you. Mia nodded, though her jaw tightened. She knew his reasoning was vague on purpose. There was nothing she could say that would change his mind. I appreciate your feedback, she said, her voice steady, despite the storm of emotions inside her. James leaned forward, his tone growing firmer. I've already spoken to HR. We'll finalize your exit paperwork by the end of the day. You'll receive a standard severance package. Mia stood up, still holding her composure. Thank you for the opportunity, she said, her voice unwavering. I've learned a lot during my time here. James nodded, satisfied that the conversation had ended without conflict. He watched as Mia turned and walked out of his office, her back straight and her head high. For a brief moment he felt a flicker of unease. Something about the way she carried herself didn't match the image he had in his mind of an employee being fired. But he brushed it aside, confident that he had made the right decision. As Mia walked back to her desk, the office was unusually quiet. Her colleagues avoided her gaze, though some exchanged awkward glances. The tension in the air was palpable. She began packing her belongings, her movements calm and deliberate. She didn't rush or show any signs of distress, which only made the scene more striking. One co-worker, a young woman named Lisa, finally approached her. Mia, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I don't know why he did this. You've been amazing here. Mia gave her a small, reassuring smile. Thank you, Lisa. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. As she packed the last of her things, Mia glanced around the office one final time. She had worked hard here, given everything she had, and yet it had never been enough for James. But as she walked out the door, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. This wasn't the end of her journey, just a detour. Meanwhile, James sat back in his office, feeling relieved. To him, letting Mia go was a practical decision. He had never been comfortable with her presence at the company. He couldn't quite explain why, but he had always felt that she didn't belong. Now, with her gone, he believed the office would run more smoothly. That afternoon, as James went through his emails, he noticed one from the company's board of directors. The subject line read, "Important update regarding Maya Johnson." His curiosity piqued. James opened the email, expecting it to be a standard follow-up about her termination. What he read made his face go pale. The email began with a brief introduction, explaining that one of the board members had recently learned about Mia's dismissal. Then it got to the point. Mia Johnson was not just any employee. She was the daughter of Harold Johnson, a highly respected business leader and a key figure in the industry. Harold sat on the boards of multiple corporations, including the company James ran. The email went on to describe Maya's professional background. She was a top graduate from one of the country's most prestigious universities and had earned recognition for her exceptional skills in business strategy. Her work had caught the attention of senior leaders across the industry. The board member expressed shock and disappointment that James had failed to recognize her talent and potential. James's chest tightened as he reread the email, hoping he had misunderstood. But the words were clear. Not only had he fired someone with powerful connections, but he had also overlooked an opportunity to have one of the brightest minds in the field contributing to his company. For the first time that day, James felt true regret. He thought back to his conversation with Mia. She hadn't argued or tried to change his mind. She had accepted his decision with grace, and now he realized why. She didn't need this job. She had options, far more than he had assumed. As the weight of his mistake sank in, James began to sweat. What would Harold Johnson think when he found out? What would the board say? His decision, which had seemed so easy at the time, was now spiraling into a potential disaster. James stared out the window, his mind racing. He had made a mistake. Not just in firing Mia, but in letting his biases cloud his judgment. He had dismissed her without truly understanding her value, and now the consequences were coming for him. The phone on his desk rang, breaking his thoughts. It was a call from one of the board members. James hesitated for a moment before picking it up, bracing himself for what was to come. James hesitated before answering the phone, his hand trembling slightly. He knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary call. He picked up the receiver and forced his voice to sound calm. "Hello, this is James." The voice on the other end belonged to Richard Caldwell, a senior member of the company's board of directors. His tone was sharp, cutting straight to the point. "James, I just received some very troubling news about Mia Johnson's termination. Can you explain why you decided to fire her?" James swallowed hard, his mind racing for an explanation. "Well, Richard," he began carefully, "I reviewed her performance, and I didn't think she was the right fit for our team. It was a decision based on her contributions to the company." Richard's tone grew colder. "Not the right fit? Do you realize who Mia Johnson is?" James's stomach sank. I wasn't aware of her personal connections," he admitted reluctantly. "Connections," Richard snapped. "This isn't about her family, James. It's about her talent. Mia is one of the most qualified employees you've had in years. Her work ethic, her results, everything about her has been exemplary. And yet, you fired her?" James opened his mouth to respond, but Richard didn't give him the chance. "Do you understand the damage this could do to our company's reputation? Harold Johnson is one of the most influential figures in the industry. He's been instrumental in securing partnerships and investments for us. And you just dismissed his daughter without so much as a second thought." James's hand tightened around the phone. "I didn't know," he said weakly, realizing how hollow the words sounded. "That's the problem," Richard said bluntly. "You didn't take the time to know. Your personal biases clouded your judgment, and now we're all going to feel the repercussions." The call ended shortly after, leaving James in stunned silence. He leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning. He thought about the conversation he'd had with Mia earlier that day. She had been calm, even graceful, as he told her she was being let go. Now he understood why. She didn't need his approval or validation. She had something far more powerful: confidence in herself and her abilities. As the hours passed, James couldn't shake the sense of dread building inside him. Word of Mia's dismissal had reached Harold Johnson, and the fallout was already beginning. Emails poured in from board members and investors, questioning his decision and calling for a meeting to discuss the company's leadership. The next day, James received another message. This one was directly from Harold Johnson. The tone was polite but firm, requesting a meeting to discuss recent events. James knew there was no avoiding this confrontation. He would have to face the consequences of his actions. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, but before that, James decided to take a step he rarely did. Reach out to someone personally. He found Mia's contact information and sent her a brief email, asking if she would be willing to meet. To his surprise, Mia agreed. They met in a quiet cafe not far from the office. Mia arrived first, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea. When James walked in, she greeted him with the same calm demeanor that had unsettled him the day before. It was clear that she wasn't angry. She was simply unbothered by him. "Mia," James began as he sat down, his voice unusually soft. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." She nodded, taking a sip of her tea. "I was curious about what you had to say." James cleared his throat, feeling the weight of the moment. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "I realize now that I misjudged you. Your contributions to the company were invaluable, and I let my own assumptions get in the way of seeing that." Mia tilted her head slightly, her expression neutral. "What exactly were your assumptions, Mr. Parker?" she asked, her voice calm but pointed. James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I thought you didn't fit the company's culture," he admitted. "I see now that I was wrong. I let my biases cloud my judgment, and I failed to recognize your talent and potential." Mia listened quietly, her gaze steady. "It's good that you've realized that," she said after a moment. "But your decision didn't just affect me. It reflected the culture you've created in that company, a culture where people like me are overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed." Her words hit James like a punch to the gut. He had always prided himself on being a strong leader, but now he saw how much harm his leadership had caused. "You're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to do better. I want to fix this." Mia nodded. "Change is possible, Mr. Parker, but it has to be genuine. It's not about saving face or fixing your reputation. It's about creating an environment where everyone is treated with respect and given a fair chance to succeed." James sat silently for a moment, absorbing her words. "Will you come back?" he asked hesitantly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but the company would be better with you there." Mia smiled faintly and shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but no. My time with your company is over. I have other opportunities to pursue." James nodded, though her answer stung. He knew she was right to move on. Still, he felt a sense of gratitude that she had been willing to meet with him and speak so honestly. Before they parted ways, Mia left him with one final thought. "Leadership isn't just about making decisions," she said. "It's about understanding the people you're leading. If you want to be better, start there." As Mia walked away, James sat alone in the cafe, feeling a strange mix of regret and hope. He had made a terrible mistake, but he also had the chance to learn from it, and for the first time, he felt determined to do so. The day of the meeting with Harold Johnson arrived, and James felt a sense of dread he hadn't experienced in years. The conference room was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Harold entered the room with his usual commanding presence. Tall, with a calm but intense demeanor, Harold was known for his ability to cut through nonsense and get straight to the heart of any issue. "James," Harold said as he sat down, his tone polite but firm, "I assume you know why we're here." James nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, Mr. Johnson. I want to sincerely apologize for the way I handled Mia's situation." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Do you even understand what you did, or are you just sorry because of who she is?" The question stung, but James knew it was deserved. He took a deep breath before responding. "I mishandled the situation completely. I made assumptions about Mia that were unfair and untrue. I failed to see her value, both as an employee and as a person. And yes, I regret that." Harold leaned back in his chair, studying James carefully. "You let personal biases cloud your judgment," he said bluntly. "Maya has more talent and professionalism in her little finger than most people in your office combined. Yet you dismissed her without even recognizing her potential." James nodded, his head low. "I realize that now. I've made a mistake, and I'm willing to take responsibility for it." Harold's expression softened slightly, though his tone remained serious. "It's not just about Mia. Your actions reflect the culture you've allowed to grow in your company. How many other talented people have been overlooked because of your biases? How many voices have gone unheard because you didn't bother to listen?" James had no answer. He felt the weight of Harold's words pressing down on him like a mountain. He had spent years running his company with an air of confidence, believing his way was the best way. Now he saw how blind he had been. "I've already spoken with the board," Harold continued. "They're deeply concerned about the message this sends to our investors and partners. Diversity and inclusion aren't just buzzwords, James. They're essential to building a successful and innovative company." James nodded again, his face pale. "I understand," he said. "What can I do to make things right?" Harold paused for a moment before responding. "You can start by making changes, real changes. This isn't about saving your image or appeasing the board. It's about building an environment where everyone feels valued and respected. That means implementing training for yourself and your team, revisiting hiring practices, and holding people accountable, including yourself." "I'll do it," James said immediately. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Harold gave a small nod, but didn't let him off the hook completely. "Talk is cheap, James. Let's see if your actions match your words." The meeting ended, and James felt a strange sense of both relief and determination. He knew he couldn't undo the harm he had caused, but he was committed to changing, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths about himself. Meanwhile, Mia had moved on. She accepted a position at a competing firm, one that valued her skills and expertise. Within weeks, her new company was thriving with her innovative ideas. Her leadership was recognized not just internally but across the industry. Articles were written about her impact, and her reputation grew even stronger. One day, Mia received a letter. It was from James. In it, he apologized again, but this time it felt more genuine. He wrote about how he was working to change, both personally and within his company. He thanked her for teaching him a lesson, even though he knew she didn't owe him anything. Mia smiled as she read the letter. She wasn't interested in holding on to anger or resentment. For her, the best revenge was her success, and she had already achieved that. But she also hoped that James's words were more than just an apology. She hoped they were the start of something real. Back at James's company, changes were already underway. Employees noticed a shift in his behavior. He began sitting in on diversity training sessions, not just as a formality, but as a participant who truly wanted to learn. He started holding regular one-on-one meetings with staff to hear their ideas and concerns, something he had never done before. Over time, the culture at the company began to improve. Employees who had once felt overlooked now felt seen. And while the change wasn't immediate or perfect, it was a step in the right direction. James knew he still had a long way to go, but he was willing to put in the work. The twist wasn't just about James discovering who Mia was. It was about him discovering who he could be if he chose to change. And for Mia, the experience reminded her of the power of standing firm in her values, no matter the challenges she faced. In the weeks following Mia's departure, James Parker's office felt quieter, but not in a good way. There was an uncomfortable tension among the employees. Whispers about Mia's termination and the fallout with Harold Johnson had spread quickly. For the first time in years, James found himself feeling uneasy when walking through his own company. Determined to repair the damage, James took Harold Johnson's advice seriously. He scheduled a meeting with his leadership team and announced several changes. "We've made mistakes," he admitted during the meeting, his tone uncharacteristically humble. "And by we, I mean myself. I've let personal biases affect my decisions, and that's not acceptable. It's time we build a workplace that values everyone's contributions." The room was silent for a moment, but the team members were visibly surprised. James had never admitted fault before, and this shift in his attitude was unexpected. He outlined new initiatives, including mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, regular performance reviews that focused on merit rather than subjective opinions, and an open-door policy to encourage feedback from the team. These changes didn't happen overnight, and not everyone believed in James's sincerity at first. But as weeks turned into months, employees began to notice a difference. James no longer rushed through meetings, dismissing ideas he didn't immediately agree with. Instead, he listened carefully, asked questions, and genuinely engaged with his team. It was clear he was making an effort, and while he wasn't perfect, the progress was undeniable. One of the biggest moments of growth for James came during a hiring decision a few months later. The team was reviewing candidates for a senior position, and one applicant stood out. She was a highly qualified woman of color with a track record of innovation and leadership. In the past, James might have questioned whether she would fit the company's culture, but this time, he recognized the importance of her skills and how her perspective could enhance the team. James championed her hire, and when she joined the company, he made sure she felt welcomed and supported. This hire marked a turning point for the organization, and employees began to see the company as a place where talent was valued over superficial traits. Meanwhile, Mia thrived in her new role at a competing firm. Her work earned her recognition across the industry, and she quickly rose through the ranks. She was invited to speak at conferences, share her expertise, and mentor younger professionals who looked up to her. Despite everything she had experienced, Mia didn't let bitterness define her journey. She focused on her goals and continued to build the career she had always envisioned. One day, Mia received an email from Lisa, a former co-worker at James's company. Lisa wrote about the changes taking place and how the culture had started to shift for the better. "I think your departure was a wake-up call for all of us," Lisa wrote. "Even James seems like he's trying to learn. It's not the same company it was before." Mia read the email with mixed emotions. She was glad to hear that positive changes were happening, but she also knew it had come at a cost. Her departure had forced the company to confront its flaws, and while she didn't regret leaving, she hoped the changes would last. Later that week, Mia received another letter from James. It was handwritten, just like his first letter, but this one felt more reflective. James wrote about the progress the company was making and thanked Mia for her unintentional role in sparking that change. He admitted that her departure had been a turning point for him, forcing him to confront the biases he had ignored for so long. Mia folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, a small smile on her face. She didn't need James's approval or acknowledgement to validate her worth, but it was satisfying to know that her actions had made an impact. For James, the journey of change was ongoing. He continued to challenge himself and his team to think differently and embrace diversity. The board kept a close eye on his progress, and Harold Johnson occasionally checked in to ensure the changes were genuine. Over time, the company's reputation began to improve. Clients and investors noticed the shift in culture, and the business started to thrive in ways it hadn't before. The lesson wasn't just about correcting a single mistake. It was about creating an environment where mistakes like that couldn't happen again. James realized that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about understanding the people those decisions affected. As for Mia, her story became a source of inspiration for many. Her grace and resilience in the face of unfair treatment showed others that success isn't determined by the challenges you face, but by how you rise above them. She became a role model, not just for women and people of color in the industry, but for anyone striving to overcome adversity. In the end, the story of Mia and James wasn't just about a firing or a mistake. It was a story about growth, both personal and professional. It showed that while prejudice and bias can create barriers, they can also be dismantled when people are willing to reflect, learn, and change. The journey wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead. But for both Mia and James, the experience left them stronger, wiser, and more committed to creating a better future. The story of Mia Johnson and James Parker reminds us that even in the face of unfair treatment, resilience and grace can spark meaningful change. Mia could have walked away quietly, but her dignity and professionalism left a lasting impact. She not only built a successful career for herself, but also forced James and his company to confront their biases and take steps toward a better, more inclusive future. For James, the experience was humbling. It taught him that leadership isn't just about authority. It's about understanding, growth, and treating people with respect. His journey of reflection and accountability showed that it's never too late to change, but that change requires effort and sincerity. So, what about you? Have you ever faced prejudice or unfair treatment in your workplace? How would you handle a situation like Mia's? Do you think everyone deserves a chance to change, like James? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in conversations like these. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories about resilience, redemption, and lessons we can all learn. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with another story that will move your heart and make you think. Until then, take care, and remember, every act of kindness and strength has the power to change the world.